Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I apologize for the slight delay. We had some technical difficulties. However, we're about to start. We're also live on Facebook, and if you visit the United Macedonian Diaspora Facebook page, you'll be able to share the talk. So please do. I encourage you so that more people could join us this evening. Zdravo, hello, my name is Meto Koloski, and I have the privilege of serving as the current president of the United Macedonian Diaspora, or UMD, a leading voice for the Macedonian people around the world. I hope we're coming to the end of the COVID-19 pandemic and we can soon begin more in-person gatherings. Before we start, I want to acknowledge that today is 78 years since the Vatasha massacre that happened during World War II. May the 12 young Macedonian men tragically killed rest in peace and memory remain eternal. Welcome everyone to our third Muabet Someto, a series of conversations this year. For those of you first-time viewers and participants, Muabet in Macedonian means conversation. June happens to be Immigrant Heritage Month, and what better way to celebrate Macedonian immigrants than to talk about food? Tonight, morning in Australia, I'm joined by my dear friend, Katerina Nitsou, the author of Macedonia, the Cookbook. Kat, welcome to Muabet Someto. Good morning to you in Melbourne. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you.
Excellent.
How's everything in Washington?
You know, I can't complain. I mean, now that COVID-19 restrictions have been lifted, you know, things are coming back to normal. And actually, we just had our first ever in-person event over the weekend, watching, you know, the Macedonia versus Austria team, and go Macedonia tomorrow versus Ukraine.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
Indeed, indeed. So for the audience, I had the pleasure of meeting Kat several years ago when she lived in Los Angeles, and what a small world. Together with her friend, yes, and mine, one of UMD's original co-founders, Kristina Boyajieva. UMD's mission has always been about bringing people together, a liaison, if I can say. Halfway through the conversation, we'll open it up to the audience questions. So please feel free to drop those in the chat option, and we'll try to get to everyone before the conclusion of this event. Kat, you've had a journey, haven't you?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride for sure.
Your roots are from Rula, Aegean Macedonia, born and raised in Toronto, where you trained as a chef, lived in Los Angeles for 15 years, and now you're living in Melbourne with your husband, Oliver, and two adorable kids. Yes, what inspired Kat to write Macedonia, the Cookbook? Let's hear your story.
We started writing the book about a decade ago. At that time, we were living in LA, and I had just finished business school. It was 2008, and obviously the market was not that great. And after studying for so long in school, I just wanted to pivot to something more creative. So I decided to go into culinary school. And at the beginning of the process, I sort of started to experiment a little bit with recipe writing and food styling, which was more of my focus for food. I didn't particularly want to be in a traditional setting like a restaurant or anything like that. So it's actually really funny. I just turned to my husband one morning. You know, he happens to be a professional photographer as well, which was very helpful to the creation of this book. And I just said, it just sort of came to me, and I just sort of said, if I wrote a Macedonian cookbook, would you do the photos for me? And he said yes. And then it just started to, you know, that little seed just started to grow, and we started to write the recipes and conceptualize the dishes that we wanted to feature. And then it took a lot of time to test the recipes. You know, I'm sure many of the people in whatever culture you come from, you learn cooking by eye and feel and all of that. So to sort of take that experience and that knowledge and translate it to a written document is a feat in itself. So I did a lot of testing of the recipes, making sure that, you know, it was written in a way that people could execute. And then we started photographing the images, and actually the book features 104 recipes, and we photographed about 40,000 images.
That's remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, it was a feat because we really wanted it to be perfect, and really strong imagery and really strong recipes to showcase the traditional dishes in Macedonia. And over the years, it just really started to come together. And since my connection with Interlink Publishing, then we went back and did a little bit more work to it and started to add some anecdotal sort of information and some cultural sort of insights and that sort of thing, and flesh through a little bit more of the photography and that. So we're really excited about the release of the book now. It's been a long journey to complete it, but we're happy to be here for sure.
Yeah, and so we're gonna delve into a little bit more specifics, but I guess, you know, can you probably share your first memory, you know, cooking with your baba, perhaps, you know, like what, you know, the smells, the aroma, the, you know, like the taste.
Yeah, I think you know, like banitsa was probably the first nostalgic dish for me. You know, the vision of walking in at Christmas or Easter or any family gathering and a big platter being there of, you know, banitsa all cut up was probably the most nostalgic memory for me. And it's interesting because my sister-in-law in Australia is also Macedonian. And the first Christmas I spent away from my family, her mother made a tray of banitsa, and I actually went into the bathroom and started crying because it actually felt like Christmas. Aww. You know, I had missed my family. We always had these big family functions and, you know, lots of aunts and uncles and cousins and people around. And it was a really beautiful part of my childhood growing up. And then the first Christmas away obviously is difficult for anybody. And having that was really a special thing. So I would probably say those are like among the strongest memories for me. Yeah, that's a strong one for me.
Favorite ingredients that you like to cook with?
Oh, I'm a big supporter of seasoning ingredients very simply. You know, I love to source really fresh produce and treat it very delicately. And, you know, I sort of like to just have a little bit of oil, a little bit of salt, a little bit of chili, that sort of stuff. But I also really love fresh herbs. Mint is probably one of my favorites. And it's commonly used in the recipes, in a few of them. And yeah, that's a really tough one, Meto. I think it depends on the day and the year and the season. And, you know, I mean, it's interesting. Macedonian food is so sensitive to what grows, you know, in the seasons. And in the fall, I really crave the squashes and the pumpkins and those types of ingredients. And then the summer, it's more of the watermelon and the cheese and sort of that. So I think it really just depends. When you love food the way I love food, it's really hard to say.
Yeah, yeah.
Really hard
Well,
to say.
going to Macedonia during the summers and trying the tomato and then coming back here and you're like, doesn't taste like a
I
Macedonian
know. Well, you got to
tomato.
start growing your own tomatoes. That's it. You have to get a little
Right.
garden going.
I have to grow a bavcha.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, living in a concrete jungle in Washington
it's
is
tough.
not conducive for a garden. But maybe one day. My favorite dish is tavče gravče, and you know what? I grew up with my baba and dedo, and mint actually, believe it or not, was a regular in the tavče gravče.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
when I would cook it for friends that are Macedonian from other parts of Macedonia, they're like, you use mint? And I'm like, yeah, that's like a staple.
Yeah, it's a really good complement for beans and peppers, and especially dried mint, which isn't very common in North America, particularly. It's more of a Eastern European, dried herbs are sort of a thing, but mint is beautiful. My mom grew a lot of mint in our backyard, and she sort of dried it every year. And actually, when I was living in Los Angeles, she would bring it to me just sort of in packages all dried up. So I'd have, mint from our garden at home, which is always really nice.
Well, we're really pleased your mom Linda is joining us from Toronto on the Zoom call. Hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom and Dad.
But living in LA, and when we met, you had started your own catering company, which you ran for 5 years. And so, not to put you on the spot, but you cooked for many elites and celebrities. Did you make any delicious Macedonian food for them?
Yeah, it's funny actually. I sort of did. I think my style of cooking is very true to my roots, and certainly influenced a lot by my upbringing. And I ran a catering company in Los Angeles. So I did private chefing for a variety of different people, some celebrities, some not. But they were all really lovely. And yeah, I think the success of the food that I executed at that time was the same sort of philosophy of the respect for the ingredient. And I find that's very true in the Macedonian cuisine as well. It's a high respect for, and a lot of pride that goes into the ingredients and the dishes. And, there's a lot of love for food. So that comes through when you're cooking.
I'm curious, can you share stories of some of the celebrities you cooked for? Those that are, public knowledge.
I actually can't, because I did have to sign NDAs for a lot of them. But I was very fortunate to have the exposure that I had, and being in a city like Los Angeles, it was a very exciting thing to put, but they're just people. And in the end of the day, in the end of the, my biggest joy is cooking for my friends and family, and having big functions and stuff like that, and hosting the people I love that I can sit down with and enjoy the meal with. So, even though it's an exciting sort of story to tell, to, have cooked for certain people, it's not a pull on my heartstring.
Yeah. Well, let's probably go to a little bit more of the, Macedonian traditions and values. And, reading your bio and having met, your husband, Oliver, how did you get him so passionate to help you on this project? And, being non-Macedonian in particular, something, given that a lot of us obviously, and my parents moving here, your parents and all that, I mean, coming to this world, yes, you might grow up in a somewhat of a Macedonian community, but you're mingling and networking and going to school with a lot of other people, right? In your career.
Absolutely, yeah.
And everything. And so you marry a non-Macedonian and you rope them into the Macedonian culture.
It's easy, Meto. You just feed them. That's it. You just make good food, and they'll come around.
What does that say? A way to somebody's heart is through his stomach, huh?
That's right. No, I mean, he's a very creative person, obviously, because he chose, photography and cinematography as his path. And it was an interesting sort of journey for both of us because he didn't particularly have experience with food photography, and it was certainly a learning curve for both of us. But there was no pressure on us to write the book. I mean, it was completely a passion project that we just decided to embark on, and we really didn't know where it was going to end up. So we, it took a long time because we just sort of chipped away at it. And it would be one of those things that we'd, I'd write a recipe, I'd test it, make it a couple of times. It's what we would have for dinner. We'd go to friends' houses, we'd bring it over. And then, we'd sort of chip away at things, but it was normally the dishes in the, in the cookbook that we photographed that everyone will get to see. That's what we ended up eating for dinner that night. And it was just sort of that was my ploy, really.
Love it. Love it. And, can you share some of the challenges, publishing, something like this? Because, I've seen other cookbooks per se, churches doing it, different organizations, but yours happens to be like probably one of the top that I've seen. And, what a beautiful cover, that you have, obviously, your virtual background is the cover of the cookbook, but, I love it. And what a great design. And so, can you shed some light on the challenges that you face? Because like I've heard, people, oh, Macedonian is not well known. Nobody really knows about it. Why? You're not going to, let's say if somebody opened a restaurant, you're not going to make profit off of it or whatever. And what are the challenges, I guess? Can you shed some of the challenges for our audience?
Yeah, I certainly can relate to that type of disconnect, specifically in Los Angeles. I mean, I found that, there's not as big of a Macedonian community in Los Angeles as there is in Toronto or in Melbourne. So there was sort of a lot of, when people would ask, well, where are you from and what's your nationality and all that sort of stuff, there was a little bit of explanation that had to go behind that. But, the challenges of the cookbook really had to just be the perseverance. I mean, to sort of stick to it. And there were a lot of times throughout the last decade that we sort of thought, oh, what are we doing this for? And I just sort of thought to myself, I never wrote this book with the intent of it even being published. The fact that it's being published and going to be sold all around the world is a very exciting thing, but it wasn't, I mean, sure, I'd hoped that would happen. But in a way, I just wanted to document the recipes, for just the people that I knew and for family and for whoever was interested. And it was certainly a challenge. Some of the testing of the recipes were really challenging. It's funny, there was a few sort of difficult moments in the photography because food is very difficult to photograph. I remember even, and I'm sure my mom will be laughing about this because she happened to be there at the time, but we were shooting tulumbi and I was pregnant with my daughter and I was like nearly, very close to the end of my pregnancy. And the tulumbi just wouldn't photograph. And by the time we took them out of the fryer and put them in this, by the time you get them on the plate, it just was not working. And it was a very challenging thing.
I envy anybody that knows how to make tulumbi.
I know. I mean, believe me, it took me a while to really master it as well. And, there's only so many donuts you can eat, really. So it was a very challenging feat. So those types of things internally of the creation of the book were certainly very challenging. But I would have to say the biggest thing for anyone that's embarking on creating any sort of documentation, be it another cookbook or, a story or anything, is the perseverance to stay through it, because, you have a vision of what it's going to be, and then it just becomes its own organic beast, and you can't really control. And the amount of copy editing and stuff that went into the book. But we got through it, and here we are. So, yeah.
So we have a chef as one of our guests, and Nick Tsarovsky, who runs Better Balkan on YouTube, and he asks which recipe gave you the most trouble. I'm guessing the tulumbi, but I want to hear your answer. And which one took the longest until you felt it was right?
Probably the Tulumbi were a tough one. But we got there. And it's not particularly challenging. It was just more of getting the recipe, the quantities and stuff accurate so that it could hold its shape. I would have to say, and I say this with full honesty, even though I've made burek or banitsa, I think that it's a lifelong craft to master the dough of burek or banitsa. And the level of experience that goes into it is, I mean, it's just an art. It really is an art form. And even though, the burek and the banitsa in the recipe are delicious and it comes out very well, I will in no way assume that, I mean, there's a lot of particularly elder women that have been doing it for a very long time and all of that. I mean, it's just a craft that is really, it takes years to master. So that would probably be my answer for that. Yeah.
Okay. Every region in Macedonia calls it something different,
That's right.
Zelnik, all that. And
Pizza.
I know pizza and whatnot. One of the other questions from the audience is, Macedonians in Lerin love to eat kokoshka so oris, or chicken with rice. Does your cookbook have this recipe?
We do have that recipe. Yeah, we absolutely do.
Any recommendations for our guests when they're making it?
I would say don't be afraid of poultry that has the skin and the bones in. There's the amount of flavor is just infinite when you include the bones and the skin in the dish. And and just that would probably say that just choose the really great ingredients and don't be, I prefer mine with the bones. I know it's a little bit more rustic, but I think it's the better way to go for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And that's how my baba made it, and I think that's extremely authentic.
Absolutely.
And so for people that have never tried Macedonian food, one of our audience participants asks, what dish would you recommend for the first time?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
Introduce the Macedonian cuisine to a non-Macedonian.
I would say tafche gravche.
Huh.
I think that because it's the national dish, and I think personally it really truly captures the essence of Macedonian cuisine. I think that it's a really great place to start. And because if you make it without, if you happen to be vegetarian or vegan or anything, it really does work unless you use chicken stock or something like that, which I don't in my recipe, but I think it's a really great place for people to start. And it's one of those dishes that is fabulous on its own. I like to make tafche gravche and just have, a big hunk of feta cheese and a big piece of bread, and that's dinner for me. But it's also really lovely as a side dish as well. If you're doing barbecue or, roasting meat or anything, it's great in the summer, it's great in the winter. I would probably say tafche gravche is a great place to start. And for those of you who may not be familiar with that, tafche gravche is essentially it's a baked bean dish with peppers, and it's sort of not saucy in like a soupy type way, but it's a really lovely dish, and especially with fresh or dried mint, it's beautiful.
Well, it is my my favorite dish, and every time I have guests, that are not Macedonian, I make it, and they love it, and always add a tomato salad and some baguette. I think it's a perfect mix.
Perfect meal, yeah.
Definitely. And you're doing an enormous job, by taking Macedonian cooking to the mainstream. Your cookbooks received awesome reviews by, publications like Forward Magazine, Publishers Weekly, and more. What are your plans, for the book now that obviously pandemic of Australia is obviously getting out of the pandemic a lot more. Obviously you have the lockdown recently. What are your plans for the next month, 2 months, year once the book, obviously people can pre-order it now through your website, macedoniacookbook.com, which was also included in the invitation for people, and we encourage them to buy the book. But what are the next plans for the cookbook?
I think that I would love to just start to hear the feedback from not necessarily the people that are reviewing the books. I want to hear the feedback from people that are making the recipes, and especially people of the Macedonian culture background. It's really nice to hear. There are a few people that know about the book and have come to me and are really overjoyed by the fact that this book is about to come out, because their grandparents may have passed on and they didn't have documentation of the traditional recipes that they may have grown up eating, and those are the things that are very special to me, and a big reason of why I wanted to write the book. So for the next few months, I'm open to just hearing what people have to say about the book, and enjoying the recipes and the feedback. And yeah, I'm really excited. We're just at the beginning of its launch, so it's going to be a very exciting year ahead, and hopefully just spreading the word and getting Macedonian and non-Macedonian people alike excited about Macedonian food. So
yeah, and a few people in the chat are posting about piftia and pitulitsi. So let's go with the P's. What what are your feelings about piftia and pitulitsi?
We have a pitulitsi recipe in the book. It's a great recipe. It's one of those things that's very traditionally made for celebrations in the Macedonian culture. So there's certainly an air of sort of specialness to them. But it's one of those things you just have to tackle and make.
Well, piftia is one of those dishes that, as Jim, who's on our advisory council, Jim Pavle is laughing, and I see him, and it's you either love or hate it, and some people can do it, some can't.
Yeah.
But can you tell us? Obviously, there's the vegan, the vegetarian, the gluten-free. Any recommendations from Macedonian cooking in your cookbook for those that are
there's actually quite a fair variety of dishes that will accommodate a variety of dietary needs. Many of the salads and the soups are gluten-free. Many of them are vegetarian and vegan. There's nothing wrong with swapping out if the recipe calls for a stock, like a chicken stock, or there's nothing wrong with incorporating water or vegetable stock in place of that. There's a lot of variety in Macedonian cuisine, and Macedonian cuisine is very fresh and bright and rustic in nature, and it's not an overly complicated, heavy cuisine. And I think that there is quite a bit of varieties for dishes. Obviously, if you're gluten-free, the bread chapter is maybe not the chapter for you, but there's a lot of other great dishes that you can explore Macedonian cuisine while staying in your dietary restrictions.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's another question is, are there other Macedonian chefs that you follow other than Baba?
Well, actually, now living in Melbourne, I'm very excited about the Lele restaurant, and it was the first restaurant that we attended after the lift of the lockdown. So for those of you that may or may not know, Melbourne was out of the lockdown for quite a few months. Unfortunately, we are back in, but that's another story. But Lele restaurant is an amazing example of Macedonian food that's been elevated and true to form. And it's not just Macedonian dishes that are featured in a different type of restaurant. It's a true capture of Macedonian food. And it's a beautiful space, and it feels very much at home. So I'm very excited to live in a city that has a fabulous Macedonian restaurant just close by. And I would probably say that would be my biggest biggest excitement about my new move to Melbourne.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know the owner Mickey of Lele, but I haven't been, and hopefully on the next trip to
Well, we'll be
Australia,
going together, Meto.
we'll go together, have some, tavče gravče and some rakia.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And we have another guest, and that's Ryan Miller, who runs a company called Zelnik out of Ohio, and he's asking, one, the publication date, and I pre-ordered the book back in March, I believe. So what's the actual date of the publication? And then also, a lot of Macedonian dishes take hours, to prepare. Do you see this as a complication for a high volume restaurant?
No, I don't necessarily see it as a complication. I think that any restaurant has the capacity to execute the dishes and treat things. I mean, obviously the way you treat cooking in a restaurant is very different than cooking at home. Many of the soups and stuff could be made in the morning and are beautiful if they're reheated. A lot of the braised dishes and the stews and stuff, the same. It's not such a I mean, obviously the fried components and things that are, better fresh off the heat is something that needs to be considered, but a restaurant would be able to handle any of that type of execution. And then, sorry, there was another question at the beginning of
the publication.
So the publication is a bit out of my hands at the moment. Unfortunately, from my knowledge, the books have been printed and are on their way to delivery. So there's distribution points all over the world. But in lieu of the current pandemic, and I don't want to make that an excuse, but there are, issues where things could be held up. They may not be. It's my understanding that North America is going to be receiving the books quite soon. Australia, New Zealand might take a little longer. Europe, somewhere sort of in July, August, probably. So I think it really just, the books are coming, they are printed. It's just maybe taking a little bit of patience just with, the distribution channels and stuff like that.
A fun question. Are you a fan of rakia, and do you prefer it, straight or hot, topla rakia?
I am a fan of rakia, and not much, because it is obviously a little bit strong. I'm probably more of a wine drinker myself, but I do enjoy a little bit of rakia at the end of the day. And I'd probably just say neat, straight, not warm, just straight.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think there was a movie, I think it was like A Name is a Name, or one of those. I was saying we start the day with rakia and end it with red wine. And obviously you have a nice shopska salad with rakia.
Yeah.
Kat, I guess, what are, what kind of advice would you give, in terms of the ingredients? You said you could substitute, you could, do a lot, but, like when I asked my mom, oh, how do you make this? And she's like, yeah, stai tolku, put a, little bit of this and a little bit of that. And you're like, Ma, but that's not really helping me. And I always make a mistake with the salt, like, oh, it's not salt and salty enough, or and then Macedonians tend to like a lot of their food, perhaps a little bit on the saltier side. It's like, how do you gauge ingredients, because obviously your recipes are going to be specific, but
there's variations.
Yeah.
Well, I think that Macedonian food is actually quite forgiving. I think that it lends itself to quite a little bit of flexibility with the ingredients. And one of the sort of things that I learned when I did culinary training was that you have to test and taste things all throughout the process. You can't just follow the recipe, because the salt that I purchase at the grocery store might be a little less salty or more salty than the salt that you purchase at the grocery store. So I think it's really important to be connected to the dish when you're cooking. And in that, you have to sort of taste along as you go. I mean, I'll make a soup, for example, and I'll taste it 3 or 4 times from beginning to end until I think that it's right. And it's better to put a little bit less, obviously, and then add more because you can't take it out after the fact. But I also think even with baking and stuff like that, it's really important just to know sort of what you're looking for. And in the book, I actually explain that I try to sort of provide visual cues of what you need to look for, so that you know it's done. I mean, golden brown around the edges or like to that effect. And it's very important to sort of pay attention to the cooking, because in culinary school, for example, they never said, it's done when it's done, it's ready when it's ready. And you have to really sort of be connected to it. And for anyone that feels a little bit nervous about cooking, I mean, it's just food. It's not, I mean, I'm not a surgeon performing brain surgery. No one's life is really dependent. If it's really that bad, you just order pizza. It's not a big deal. You just try and have fun, and it's meant to be fun. And, it's not so, so it shouldn't be so stressful. I know some people do get overwhelmed with cooking, but I think the Macedonian cuisine, as I said before, it does lend itself to a little bit of flexibility. And if there's a soup that you want to make or a stew you want to make, and you don't have enough of the peppers or too much of it'll be fine. It'll still work out.
And if you could probably, one of the other questions is, Yagnishko, kokoshka, like what are, like the beef, what meat dishes, are some of the recommendations or your favorites?
So the book is broken down in a variety of different chapters, but for the proteins, it's poultry, meats, and seafood, fish. And then the meat sort of, and the poultry do kind of, and the seafood, you do sort of see it throughout the soup recipes and into the mezes and stuff like that as well. Macedonian cuisine typically is a lot of more pork, chicken, freshwater fish, because, geographically it's not on the Mediterranean. We have more access to, lake trout, like Ohrid is known for their lake trout and that sort of stuff. So in the cookbook, I try to keep it as authentic as possible. Now, obviously, depending on where you live and what is accessible to you will determine sort of different fishes and stuff that you can use. Beef is commonly used. There's a lot of ground beef, in the recipe, particularly in the polneti piperki, which are stuffed peppers and sort of those types of dishes. But there's a lot of really beautiful meat dishes. The stews I happen to make at home a lot. And stews are great because it's one of those things that they'll last for a few days. I have 2 young children, and I'm a busy working mother. So for me, anything that will last for a few days, so I don't have to cook every single night, is really helpful. So we do a lot of stews and braises and stuff like that. And I would just say, give it time. The longer you can leave it in the oven, the longer you can let it just all come together, as the meat becomes very tender and succulent. So. Yeah.
So again, to bring some humor into the conversation, how can we convince the Macedonians that meat doesn't need to be completely burnt before they stop saying it?
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I think it's you just have to. I don't know. I'm still battling that a little bit in my own family, so. I haven't worked that out. I might have to come back to you on that one.
Yeah, when I make steak, or we have a barbecue, I like mine medium, and my parents are like, "Well done."
Oh yeah.
And
sorry, Mom and Dad. I know you're listening now, but yeah, it's well done.
Definitely fighting our families on that one, and and I'm sure the non-Macedonian spouses make those comments, as Charles is saying in the chat. But Christina in the chat's asking, what's a family favorite dish for you and the kids and the husband?
Ooh, I'd have to say that at the moment it's the split pea soup, the regrashka chorba. It's my son loves it, and my daughter's a little bit of a picky eater, unfortunately, for lack of trying on my end, but she's very particular of what she likes. but my son is a little bit more open, which is great. And we've been making a lot of split pea soup. We're in winter here in Melbourne at the moment, so it's sort of that type of thing, but he will just love it. And my husband really loves it. And it's probably the easiest soup to make. It's such a quick, dinner sort of, hearty meal. And actually I have a friend of mine who's Serbian. Her daughter and my daughter go to school together, and she was over the other day. Her daughter came for a play date, and I had a big pot of the chorba, and I offered her some, and she's like, you have to give me the recipe. She went home that night, and apparently her husband is quite a picky eater as well and loved it. So I think that's probably our weekly, the last few weeks, that's been our go-to.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I ever grew up with split pea soup. It was more the stewed bean dish as opposed to the split pea, but I have to start that up.
It's so easy. It's so satisfying. It gets really creamy and it's good.
Wow. Wow. Well, we're winding down in our conversation, but how can we all help, through United Macedonian Diaspora, through other organizations, present here, our different communities? How can we help, get this book out there and get it promoted?
I would have to say it's just as simple as spreading the word. I mean, if anyone on the discussion today gets a copy of the book and you're happy with it and enjoy it, just spread the word. It makes a great gift for people, for bridal showers and baby showers, and somebody buying a new house or moving in on their own for the first time. I mean, it makes a really lovely gift for people. And I think it would be really lovely to have, one of the big reasons in writing the book particularly was to create something that showcased Macedonian cuisine in a very sophisticated and elegant way. And I think that we've achieved that with the book. So I think I'm very excited for Macedonia to be presented in that way. And I think just spreading the word and supporting the book and, enjoying it really. And I think that's the most important.
Would you consider, obviously it's in English, many of us, have our Macedonian language recipes from passed down, generation to generation, but any other languages that you would consider translating it in and publishing?
Yeah, there is some discussion with the publisher about translating it. I think it's something that they monitor the market. So as an example, if, Macedonians in Macedonia, if there's a big push to want it translated, then yes, the publisher is definitely open to translating it into other languages, and that'll be very exciting. Absolutely.
Well, definitely, consider, German, because there's a huge Macedonian community in Germany, and also, the Scandinavian countries. And I think that would provide a great place to get the book published.
Oh, I'll have to let them know.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Kat, it was a real pleasure.
It was such a pleasure, Meto.
Seeing you and chatting with you, and I really am excited about the Macedonia, the cookbook.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone who tuned in. It's very lovely to feel the support of everyone.
Definitely. Yeah. And, thank you everyone for coming to our Muabet with the author of Macedonia, the cookbook, Katerina Nitsou. Don't forget to pre-order the cookbook by visiting her website, which is www.macedoniacookbook.com. And I'm also putting it in the chat as well.
Meto, can I also just say for those that are in the US, UMD has done a connection with Amazon Smile. Do you want to just explain quickly, because that's such a great program that's happening, so I'd love to support that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kat, for mentioning that, and I'm so glad that you were willing to do this. And you put the link on your website for the United States ordering is through Amazon Smile, and Amazon Smile supports charities in the United States, and UMD as a 501c3 charity is eligible for this, and people can link their Amazon accounts through Amazon Smile, and Amazon donates at no charge to you or the company that is selling the item, and it all goes to a lot of it goes to charity. So I'm really happy about that, and thank you very much, Kat, for doing that and for supporting UMD. And like I said, whatever we can do to support you and spread the word, we'd love to. I've always had this motto that we Macedonians are responsible for one another. It hasn't been easy coming to these distant countries from our homeland, and we try to stick together as much as we can. We try to eat the Macedonian food and gather at different weddings and christenings and all that, and it's we definitely have to continue that and figuring out ways of how to keep the traditions alive. And I think that what you're doing with the cookbook and food is our best ambassador, our culture. And I hope that I do a wine tour every year to Macedonia, and maybe I can convince you and Oliver to come, and maybe you could.
That's not a hard thing to convince us, Meto. That not at all. We'll be there.
Excellent. So maybe we could do a culinary experience of Macedonia, with Katerina Nitsou, showcasing Macedonian food, and visit some of the wineries. So highly recommend for the audience, everybody watching on Facebook and YouTube, Macedonia, the cookbook. It's a great birthday gift, a wedding present for your non-Macedonian significant other to teach them how to cook Macedonian, and of course, a perfect holiday gift. But actually, you know what? Forget all that. Buy it for yourself, like I did, to display on my living room table. So with that, I want to conclude by encouraging you all to watch tomorrow's Euro 2020 match between Macedonia and Ukraine. It's the first time Macedonia is in the European Championships. But thank you very much, Kat. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Meto.
Have a wonderful night and a great day to those watching from Australia. Till next time, or to the next Muabet with Meto. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.